Perfect. All right, great. Listen, thanks everybody for coming tonight. It's a great turnout. I was telling some folks beforehand, we just did this, I guess a couple months ago, just a month or two ago, in Spartanburg County, which is a new area for me. They redrew the districts, and I represent now Sumter up to Lancaster, where I live, and over to about Calvin's National Battlefield, and then down to Newberry, and then back over to Sumter. And we sent out 1,800 invitations to our little town hall meeting in Calvin's, and 4 people showed up. So it's nice to have a decent crowd, and folks who are actually legitimately cared and interested in what's going on. Some of you have been to see my town hall meetings before. This is probably my 40th, give or take, since I got elected in 2010. However, tonight is a new one. I try and change it up because a lot of folks come to more than one, and I always want to try and get new information. Obviously, there's new things happening in Washington every time I come down. So that's the good news. Everything you see here for the most part tonight will be new. So if you've been to the town hall meetings before, this should all be new. The bad news is this is the very first time I've done it. So y'all are my guinea pigs. And some of it's going to work, and some of it's not going to work. So if we do have some technical difficulties with the slides and stuff, I beg your patience. And what we're going to do is I've shortened it. I've shortened my part of the presentation down to about 15 or 20 minutes. It used to be about half an hour, so that we can get into questions a lot quicker. When we talked to folks about this, they said what they really liked was the chance to ask questions. And honestly, I mean, I've done this 40 times. I'd much rather hear what y'all have to say. I know what I'm going to say. We also, by the way, if I get a chance, because I'm going to do this more than once, I'm going to plug again the website, mulvaney.house.gov. If you haven't done one of our telephone town hall meetings yet, I hope you get a chance to do that soon. We do call about 50,000 people at random every single month. But when you represent 700,000 people, it takes a while to get through everybody. If you sign up at the website, you can get notice of when we're due our next telephone town hall meeting, and you can call in and participate. We do these about once a month. We haven't done them for October, November, December because it's against our rules as members of the House. We can't do it around election season, but we'll start it. I think the next one, Eric, is a Saturday coming up, isn't it?
Yes.
2 weeks or something like that. Again, we do it for about an hour. We usually do it at night, although it is dinner time. So what we've done is, again, taking some feedback from people. We decided to try one on Saturday morning, I think, 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, to see if we get good turnout. It's very similar to this in that I give a short presentation on what's happening in Washington, and then you can press 1 on your phone and ask whatever questions you want to. And we take questions for about an hour. Again, we've done probably 12 or 15 of those in addition to the 40 in person. So if you get a chance, mulvaney.house.gov, and participate in those meetings. So what we're going to do tonight is go through the new presentation. I get this question a lot, so I decided to give it the title of the next town hall meeting, which is, are things really as crazy as everybody says they are? And this is my answer to that, which is yes. For those of you who don't know, if you're not between the ages of 35 and 50, that is a character from Saturday Night Live by the name of Stuart Smalley. He was a regular character on the Saturday Night Live television program. That man is now a United States Senator. That's Senator Al Franken from Minnesota, so who was a comedian before he was a senator. So yes, it's just as crazy as we think it is, but that doesn't mean that nothing goes on, because a lot of stuff is going on. So we took 3 things tonight, talk about very briefly, 3 hot topics, and then I'll stop and take questions. So the first one people talk about is the fiscal cliff. What was it? What is it? Was it really that big a deal? And this is what we all heard about it. It got resolved. Remember, it's finished. When it came and it went, and the world didn't end. And the president and many other folks said this: it's going to be a balanced, responsible way. We're not going to hurt the economy. We're going to balance automatic spending cuts, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, this is what we've heard. This is not what happened. Okay, none of this actually happened. This is what happened. Okay. Taxes did go up on the rich, which is defined roughly now as any family making $450,000 or more in a year. But that's not the only thing that happened. In fact, if anybody here is still getting a paycheck, everybody in this room who's getting a paycheck had their taxes go up. My guess is you didn't hear about that before we voted on the fiscal cliff. This is because we allowed the payroll tax cuts to expire. I got a lot of mail from people, phone calls from people saying, I don't make $450,000 a year. Why did my taxes go up? I'm going to show you why that is in just a second. the actual increase, as I'll show, is about $1,000 on the folks making $50,000 a year. Spending went up. Spending went up. I voted against the fiscal cliff deal, and I could give you 6 or 7 reasons, but the short answer, when everybody asked me, said, why'd you vote against it? Because it increased spending. The balanced approach, remember, was supposed to be revenues going up and spending going down. See, spending cuts. Never happened. Never happened. Spending went up. We added over $300 billion to the deficit over the next 10 years by approving this deal. And worst of all was the corporate welfare involved. GE got a break. Rum distillers got a break. NASCAR got a break. Hollywood movie producers got a break. Everybody got a break except you, is what it comes down to. There's actually a great story about this in the Wall Street Journal, where they said that there was a lot of lobbying firms in Washington that had egg on their face when this deal finally got finalized. Because in the run-up to the deal, they had turned down requests to lobby for special tax breaks. They had turned them down because, in their opinion, as lobbyists, they were too egregious. They were too overreaching. It was too much of a good thing to even ask for. I want you to think about that for a second. Lobbying firms refused to lobby because some of the requests for special treatment were so outrageous. That's what became the law. Okay? The stuff that people were afraid to ask for is what actually became part of the law. It was added by the White House in the last couple of minutes. By the way, it's not up here. The Senate voted on this after having it for 9 minutes. It was 158 pages long. So my guess is none of them, or very few of them, actually knew what they were voting on. People say all the time, well, you know, only 8 senators voted against it. I'm like, yeah, and there were probably the 8 who had the chance to read it. It was actually 97 different provisions on 150 odd pages. My guess is nobody read it. But my point is just this: it's not balanced. If you go back, spending was supposed to have more taxes and less spending, and what we got was more taxes and more spending. If that's the balance that we're moving towards, then we're going to have bigger problems than just the fiscal cliff. So everybody asked me what it was. That's what it was. We'll move on to the next one. This was the one that the gentleman friend of mine wrote me and said, I don't make $450,000 a year. Why did my taxes go up? And I said, send me your paycheck. This is actually his real paycheck from last year. This was the pay period ending last year. The end of the year gets paid every 2 weeks. He made $53,000 in 2012. His OA is the old age and survivors and disability insurance. Okay, that's Social Security right there. 7872. Right? He made $53,000 last year. Look, his weekly pay or twice weekly pay, $2,000. Federal taxes, $78. This is what they went to. Right? And that is the result of the fiscal cliff deal. And that's what it means to this gentleman. This is a single parent of 3 daughters. Okay, and he's losing $42 a pay period, which doesn't sound like a lot until you realize it's $1,022 a year. By the way, if you look at it, and I haven't highlighted it, but you look at his federal taxes are 163, his total taxes are 356. Total tax went up actually to 418. Why is that? His federal income tax went up. Okay, his South Carolina taxes went up, not because the rates changed, but because this went up. He had to drop out of his employer-sponsored healthcare program. He couldn't afford to do it anymore. So he had more taxable income. And that's why all of his taxes went up. So not only did his federal taxes, his Social Security taxes go up, but his taxable income went up because he dropped out of that health program. So now he doesn't have insurance, and he's paying more tax. This is the direct result of the fiscal cliff negotiations that we had. Again, I voted against it. For a bunch of different reasons. This is one of them. The average income in my district is about $44,000. So this gentleman is right in the middle of who I represent. This happened to every single working person in my district. And we knew it was going to happen, but nobody wanted to talk about it until after we had the vote. Okay, gun control. We'll do this very quickly. It's getting a lot of attention. I get a lot of questions about Miss Langston. Did I remember the name right? Is it Miss Langston? Did I remember? Is that right? Did I get it right? Langston, good, I remember that. I'm awful with names. I'm a politician who's bad with names. It's not a good thing. But she'd asked me before about executive orders. So what I did for this presentation was put the 23 executive orders, which would be very difficult for you to see. I recognize that. I'm going to put it on 2 screens next time. But these were the 23 executive orders you may have heard the president handed down after the Biden report and so forth. Why do I do this? I do this for a couple different reasons. First of all, to show you what they are, and then second of all, to show you where I'm not worried, and then also to show you where I am a little bit worried. Oops. Is that right? The first four, or actually the first six, all deal with background checks. And my guess is that's where you're going to see a lot of the discussion going forward. You're going to see a slide here in a second about what Senator Feinstein wants to do. But a lot of what the president did deals with background checks. A lot of the discussions you're going to hear going forward, I think, will involve background checks. And what I've told people before, I'll say it again, if I think one thing will actually change in the next 6 months, it will not be a ban on assault rifles, it will not be a limitation on high-capacity magazines, it will be change on background checks. A lot of folks don't realize. I admit I was one of them. I do not. I buy guns. I have plenty of guns. In fact, I got asked by USA Today. They said they did a survey of every member of Congress. Do you own any guns? And if so, how many and what kind? And my answer was yes, and then none of your business. So, but I don't buy them at gun shows. I don't buy them at gun shows. I go to gun shops and buy them there. I didn't realize that you didn't have to have a background check at a gun show. I guess I knew that, but it never applied to me. I never paid that much attention to it. My guess is that's the one change that you'll see. That rule was put in place many years ago when it was very difficult to check the database, the National Registry, to look for folks who are crazy, for example. Now it's easy to do. My guess is that's one of the things you'll see change, and probably the only significant change that you'll see in our gun laws going forward. The other stuff, again, you can, some of it doesn't really have much. Nominate an ATF director, clarifying the scope of mental health sciences, Medicaid plans covering. So a lot of it doesn't have to do with guns. It's a lot to do with mental health parity regulations. The two that bother me are the issue of presidential memorandum directing the Centers for Disease Control to research the causes and prevention of gun violence. I have no idea why the Center for Disease Control is doing that. I honestly don't. In fact, we just got this list 2 days ago. So I don't know. I'm going to find out why that's done through the CDC. I'm not sure why. Gun violence is a problem. I mean, there's not a person in this room who doesn't think gun violence is a problem. I'm not sure why it's a disease. And I'm not sure why it's dealt with through there. The other one is to clarify that the Affordable Care Act does not prohibit doctors from asking their patients about guns in their homes. I have no idea why we want doctors to do that. Again, that doesn't sound to me like it's a healthcare thing. These are the two things I'll focus on. On the larger thing, you ask yourself, well, the president can't do all these executive orders, can he? That's Ms. Langston's question. Yes, he can. In fact, it's one of the things that the president is supposed to do. We pass the law and the president administers or executes the laws, and he's supposed to do these executive orders. These are not the type that typically, with the exception of the ones I put in yellow, that would raise a red flag. This does not appear to be an overreach of presidential authority. He has the ability under the existing laws to do all of these things. So my guess is these will probably hold up even if they are challenged. Again, it comes back to a couple of questions about the CDC and the Affordable Care Act. But again, we do not think the president has overreached his authority in doing so. He has not banned semi-automatic rifles with executive orders. He can't, and he has not tried to do that. He has not banned high-capacity magazines either. He doesn't have the authority to do that, but that's not what he sought to do here. Again, I think a lot of people don't realize it's nominating a director, doing a DOJ report, issuing a random to require law enforcement to trace guns for government in criminal investigations. For many of these things, I was surprised we weren't doing them anyway. But anyway, this is Ms. Feinstein, who I think it's fairly widely reported now, either used to have or still has her own concealed weapons permit, which I thought was interesting. I put it up here because it is the most aggressive proposal that's been offered so far. Again, I don't believe any of these things is going to happen. It's real. We need to be diligent about it, as we do with all of our rights, but I don't see this actually becoming law. In fact, I tell people, they say, what is the House going to do on gun control? And the answer is nothing until the Senate does something. My guess is Mr. Biden and the president could not pass what they want out of the democratically controlled Senate. So there's really no use for the House to take it up until the Senate has actually done something. Last and not least, you could not come to one of my things without talking about debts and deficit. Finally, some good news. If you've come to my meetings over the course of the last 26 months, how long have I been doing this job? 26 months? A lot of folks walk out and they say, boy, there's no good news in what you told us, Mr. Mulvaney. Unfortunately, there's sometimes not a lot of good news. We actually had some good news this past week. so I want to talk about it just a second. The Senate hasn't passed a budget in 4 years. 4 years. They are required by law to pass a budget every single year, as we are in the House. You go to read the Budget Act of 1974, and it says, "Thou shalt pass a budget by April 15th of each year." The difficulty is there's no penalty for not doing so. It requires us to do it, but doesn't say what happens if we don't do it. We want to fix that. And what we offered this past week was called No Budget, No Pay, which essentially said that if we don't meet it, then our penalty is our pay will be withheld. You couldn't not pay us, by the way. You hear people say that we don't get paid, and you actually can't do that because of the 27th Amendment. We can change the timing of our pay. We cannot change our own pay. And we can change pay of future Congresses, but we'll worry about that another time. The point of the matter is, it worked. It worked. As soon as we threatened to do this, Chuck Schumer came out and said that the Senate had been planning on secretly passing a budget for a long time. I'm not making this up. He said, we've been talking about this in secret. We were going to pass a budget anyway. Hey, that's great. That's great. Well, why is it important to me? And not just as a Republican, but somebody who actually wants to solve this problem. For the last 2 years, anybody who's been paying attention, which is most of the people in this room, have heard me come and talk about the importance of spending restraint, deficit control, entitlement reform, all of those specific things for the reasons that we've often talked about. That has been competing with this wonderfully amorphous idea of hope and change and a balanced approach. And I've lost. I've lost every single, we lost the election, I think in large part based on that, in that we had specifics and we were fighting against this idea. I think the only way to actually have the debate is to be on a level playing field. And now we're going to be on that level playing field where the Republicans are going to set out their ideas on how to fix it, mostly spending reductions. And the Democrats are going to send out their specifics on how to fix things, mostly tax increases. And then y'all can decide, the American people can decide which of those two plans is the best way to go, the better way to go. Up until now, folks haven't had that choice. They've had the details that the Republicans offer and this concept, this idea of a balanced approach that the president has been offering. And the balanced approach idea has trumped our specifics. So the idea that we actually get the Senate to pass a budget is a really, really good step in the right direction. More importantly, or just as importantly, for folks who say we can't ever get along, look at this. The bill actually had 40 Democrat co-sponsors. It's actually a Democrat bill. All right, the No Budget, No Pay bill, which we attached to a debt ceiling delay, was a Democrat bill with 40 Democrat co-sponsors, and when it finally came down to the floor of the House, 200 Republicans and 85 Democrats voted for it. It's one of the most bipartisan, significant pieces of legislation to pass in the last 2 years. So I was very excited about that. I want to talk about the sequester, because you're going to hear a lot about this, especially living here in Sumter, having the large military presence that we do. What is it? Okay, it's $110 billion in cuts a year, roughly, for the next 10 years. $1.2 trillion over the next 10 years. Remember, most of the times when Washington talks about money, they talk about money in a 10-year window. So if you hear $1.2 trillion, it's really 110 a year. There is no entitlement, no real entitlement reductions. It all comes across discretionary spending. For those of you who've been to my previous meetings, you understand discretionary spending is everything that we budget for. Mandatory spending, also called entitlement spending, what I call automatic spending, is the money we spend without budgeting for it. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security being the biggest part of the mandatory spending. All of the sequester, the $110 billion, comes off of the discretionary spending. I'll talk about why that's important in a second. How big is it? Not very. In the greater scheme of things, it's not that big. We spend $3.8 trillion a year. All right, when you convert everything down to dollars, we're cutting $110 out of $3,800. It's not that much money in the greater scheme of things, especially when you consider the fact the deficit is $1,200. Okay, so we're cutting roughly 10% of our deficit. Why are we doing it? This is part of the debt ceiling debate from 2011. Voted against it, in large part because we did this in a second, but what we promised you collectively as Congress in 2011 was that if we raised the debt ceiling by $1.2 trillion, we would cut $1.2 trillion worth of spending. For every dollar worth of deficit of debt ceiling increase, we would have $1 worth of spending reductions. We were told at the time not to worry about where that $1.2 trillion worth of savings would come because the super committee was going to figure it out. The super committee did not figure it out. There were very few people who took the time to figure out what would happen if the super committee failed. I happen to be one of them, which is one of the reasons I voted against the bill. What happened if it failed was the sequester cuts, which was disproportionately heavy on military spending. Even though it's only $110 out of $3,800, okay, this spending reduction is $50 out of $500. It's actually over that. It's 11% across the board military cut on day one. And day one right now is February 28th of this year. That's why it's a problem. The spending reductions generally are not a problem. Again, it's 110 out of 3,800. The fact that half of the whole thing falls on one line item in the budget, and that is defense, is the problem. Here's the difficulty we face. The House has passed several times what we've called the sequester replacement bill, which says we don't want it to be disproportionately falling on military spending. Here's a new plan for where the money can be saved. The difficulty is the Senate, every time we pass it, throws that in the trash. And unless the Senate takes it out of the trash before February 28th, all of this happens. This happens automatically. Again, if you've heard me before, you've heard me say once of 100 times, what are we really good at in Washington? Not doing anything. We're much better at not doing things than we are at doing things. And this is going to happen if we do nothing, because that was part of the debt ceiling deal in 2011. Is it a problem? Overall, no. For the military, yes, it is. And I'm one of the Republicans who thinks that we should be looking at defense, the Defense Department for possible savings. You can't have anything take up $523 billion a year. Put that in perspective. That's $523,000 million. And you tell me we can't save anything in there, we'll have to disagree with that. But I do not think that this is the way to do it. An 11% across the board cut February 28th is not the right way to save money. By the way, and there are folks on the other side of the aisle from me who take it much further and say that we should dramatically cut defense savings. The deficit is so difficult that we should dramatically cut defense spending, I should say. You could cut defense spending to zero, and the deficit this year was to be $600 billion. Don't spend a penny on defense, and your deficit would still be $600 billion. So that's the sequester. This is the next thing you're going to hear about, by the way. Now that the debt ceiling has sort of been delayed until May, this is what you're going to start to hear. Again, what is it? How big is it? Why is it here? Is it a problem? And all of this will be on the website after tonight, so you can go back and look at this if you need to. But that's what the sequester is. After that, we'll have a little discussion about a government shutdown. Since it's a little bit ways away, I don't go to a lot of detail here. The government is currently funded through the end of March. And if we do not give it additional authority to spend money after that date, it'll be shut down. Again, we'll probably get a chance to talk in more detail before the end of March about that. But those are the things that face us. First the sequester, then the government shutdown. This is, I put this in here, it changes the topics. It's healthcare spending. It's the best single graph I have seen on healthcare spending since I've been doing this, and I have seen a lot of graphs. It is a distribution of healthcare expenditures by age across most of the developed nations in the world. Okay? There is the United Kingdom. There is Germany. There is Sweden. That is Spain. Now, when you see us, we spend about just a little bit above average and actually below the Germans up until age 57. And then look what happens. People say we spend more money than anybody else in the world on health care. It's true, but we don't do it until we get to be 57 years old, and it really doesn't take off until 65, which is right about here. What happens at 65? Medicare kicks in. This is the challenge that we face as a nation. Again, the last time I gave a presentation, it was mostly on Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, and how it's the driver of the debt. This is why we face the debt crisis that we do. We have to figure out a way to change that. Because I don't know if anybody else looks at this and thinks that this is fairly dramatic. I was stunned when I saw this. I thought the line would be up here for our whole lifetimes, and it's not. We spend about the same as everybody else. The difference is what, 4,000 versus 3,000? It's nothing. until you get to your late 50s and early 60s. This is one of the things we're going to have to fix. Actually, the thing we have to fix if we're going to get our deficits in order. You can't come to one of my meetings and not see this graph. This is the one I'm famous for. This is the one we came up in my office that you've seen on Fox News and heard all the folks talk about, including Mitt Romney, although not as effectively as I would have liked. Again, I don't talk about trillions and hundreds of billions of dollars and so forth. I change all of the numbers into something I can understand, and this is where your nation is. Last year, we made about $48,000. We spent about $78,000. We made 48, we spent 78. Think what your family would be like if that was your kitchen table conversation in January of this year. Honey, we made 48, we spent 78, we can't do that anymore. And by the way, the credit card balance is actually up here now, it's about $320,000. So imagine where you would be in your family if you're making $48,000 a year, you're spending $78,000, and you owe $325,000, not on the mortgage, but on the Visa bill. And that's exactly where we are as a nation. If you simply take that, that's 3.9 trillion, excuse me, that's $2.4 trillion, that's $3.8 trillion in spending, and that is $16 trillion in debt, and that is exactly where this nation is. Again, I won't belabor this because I know everybody who's been to these things before has seen this more times than they care to say, but they say in my business, until you're sick of hearing it, then I haven't said it enough. So everywhere I go, I talk about this one. This is the one, people, they say, Mick, how are you sleeping? And when I say not very well, this is why. Because this is exactly where our nation is. If my family were in this circumstance, I don't know what we would do. I do know what we would do. We declare bankruptcy. But that choice is not available to us as a nation. Anyway, that's all I got. And that was, that's half hour. I need to cut that down. So that's it. That's just a way to get the discussion started.